Welcome to The Lock Shop with Nielsen and Hustler, powered by Coolbet Canada.
Hey, happy Wednesday and welcome to another episode of The Lock Shop. Nielsen and Hustler back with you once again. Lots of NFL talk, obviously, daily episodes of The Lock Shop. Today, our focus is going to be Week 17 in the Canadian Football League. 4 games out west this week, which is exciting for all the fans based in Western Canada. And there's a lot of them. If you've not yet subscribe to the Lock Shop podcast, make sure you do. And if you haven't signed up for a deal at Coolbet just yet, use the code LOCKSHOP when you sign up. Huss, how are things on this wonderful Wednesday morning, buddy?
Well, they're great. Pretty nice outside. Did I hear you guys are getting up to like 28 today?
27, 28 today, buddy. It's insane. Yeah. We're 20 the rest of this week and the first half of next week.
Well, we're going to have a couple 20s as well, but we weren't touching the high 20s. Anyways, nice. We got a chance to get back to the rink last night for the first time. A little Jets home preseason action. So nice to have hockey here. But big Friday night here in the Peg. We got the Bombers Riders at the same time as WWE SmackDown returns to the downtown arena.
Wow.
So what's going on? I'll be at the game. I would have loved to have double dipped. But yeah, no,
Edge at Raw here in Edmonton.
Yeah, I did.
Apparently a big deal, buddy. Apparently a big deal.
Hey, he's a Canadian icon, Canadian wrestling and entertainment icon, Edge. So anyways, it'll be neat. We got lots going on around here. Great. A lot of excitement for the upcoming hockey season. And of course, we got a big week in the NFLs kicking off with a great Thursday nighter tomorrow. We'll get to that on tomorrow's show. But I have to admit, I'm very preoccupied with this Sunday night game between the Bucs and Chiefs. A little revenge, one more shot from Mahomes at Brady. But I'm also, being the amateur meteorologist, paying close attention to what's going on with this hurricane right now. And I think there's a potential that they might not be able to play this game in Tampa on Sunday, depending on what happens over the course of the next 24 hours.
I heard rumors of Minnesota. Might play Minnesota
is available to do it. And that's not too far away. So needless to say, the wheels are turning right now. We've got to be here on Sunday for the Dale Howardchuk statue unveiling and a hockey game. But I mean, if it's a night game, could easily get up early on Sunday and rip down there in time for the game. So I don't know. We'll see what happens. I'm focused right now, though, Dusty, on a bounce back in the CFL. 1-2 last week. My first losing week since week one, and that 0-3-1 disaster. I've been 500 or better every week since. So 4 games on the slate. Time to get back at it.
Yeah, and let's dive right into it. Bombers, Riders. The number is set at 8.5 right now, and we're going to go head-to-head on this one. I'll tell you, I do think the Bombers win this football game, but 8.5 is a pretty big number. And I know the Riders have struggled pretty much since a pretty good start, 5 or 6 games. They've fallen off since then, but it's just a huge number. 8.5 that's a big chunk. I couldn't bring myself to do it. Huss, you did. And look, just before everybody says, "Oh, Winnipeg guy taking the Bombers," you've bet against the Bombers, and you've won betting against the Bombers this year. Was the Ticats, right? Did you not have the Ticats in that game?
I did have the Ticats in that last game.
So you got a good read on the Bombers.
Well, but no one saw what was coming in that game.
No.
I mean, it was one thing to have them covering a 7-point spread. It was another thing to be getting walked all over by Dane Evans, who threw for 5 touchdowns. And it was interesting that the 2 losses for the Bombers have been going into their bye weeks. The Montreal one, I mean, I think you just have to give a mulligan on that one. They did everything they needed to win the football game. They had a 4-minute drive at the end of the game, tied, to get down and kick a 30-odd yard field goal, only needing a single to win, and somehow went to overtime. The Hamilton game was very different, and I think that we've already seen a very focused Bomber team back at practice looking to get back on track. They never have to get up for games against Saskatchewan. So I think that this team will be very motivated to come out with their best foot forward and put on a dominating performance in front of 30,000 plus here. And we saw what happened the last time the Bombers and Riders played here in Winnipeg. It was an absolute smashing. They did play a much closer game in the Labor Day Classic, as known, but home field is big in this series, and I think it plays a big role in this game. And then there's the the injuries. Hickson, to me,
that one
even though
hurts.
well, I mean, he was the one guy that was effective against the Bombers to an extent, especially in the Labor Day game. Having him out and a real question mark as to who's going to be running the football is massive, I think. DeLego got the DUI. He's out as well. Listen, the Bombers still do have some injuries. Greg Ellingson hasn't been practicing. Drew Wolodarski's out right now. We'll see whether Jackson Jeffcoat's return to practice after a couple days off. But to me, these teams are in very different area codes, if you will. I mean, the Bombers are the best team, and the Saskatchewan Roughriders have been very, very disappointing this season. They pretty much know where they're finishing. They're fourth in the West. They're in all likelihood going to be a crossover team. But I think the Bombers step up big time and win by double digits in this game. I would have loved the number to be a little bit lower. Wouldn't be surprised if it gets there at some point. But for right now, I'm going to take the Bombers to cover this number, get back on track, get to 13-2, and continue strengthening their hold on first place and a little closer to booking that West final right here in Winnipeg.
Running game certainly is a concern with Hickson out because, Jamal Morrow is great. He went down. Hickson, you could argue, in some ways was even better than Jamal Morrow. So not having either of those guys is going to sting. But, however, one of the reasons they've sucked so much this year is because their offensive line has been banged up. Dan Clark returns, huge piece. Like, you cannot talk about losing a center who's been the go-to guy for 10 years on that offensive line and basically asking a bunch of guys who've never done it to step in. I mean, I think Dan Clark returning changes a lot. They're also, it looks like Vaughn is going to be good to go and Logan Bandy is back. So, I mean, all of a sudden they have the semblance of an offensive line again. Duke Williams was practicing in full this week as well. So you're going to have another weapon. This will be, I believe, the first game, I know because Lenius just came back, but this should be the first game all season in which Duke Williams, Schaefer Baker, Lenius, Kyron Moore, Shaq Evans are all there. That's a really good receiving group that they just haven't had for much of the year. I think some time off for Cody Fajardo will help him. You get the offensive line back in as well. You are right about the home. I mean, that's why it's an 8.5 number here. You get the Bombers at home and what they've done against the Riders. So I don't think the Riders walk in and stun the Bombers and come away with a victory, but I do think getting healthy on that offensive line should be enough to keep them within 8.5 in this game. So I'm going to take the road dog here. I'm going to go with the Riders plus 8.5. So go head to head on our first game of the week. We'll also go head to head a little bit later on the last game of the week as well. But we got two that we're on the same side of in the middle here.
Yeah, we are. By the way, the Bombers did drop a 50 burger on them and win by 34 a few weeks ago in Winnipeg. So they would need.
Do you think that happens again?
Yeah.
Could you see that happening again? That's a big one.
Yeah, no, I can't see that happening again. I think in all likelihood, the Bombers, if they have a strong offensive performance, are scoring maybe in the 30s. And again, by my plan for the Bombers to cover, I think the Riders end up in the teens sort of thing, maybe a 31-18 sort of game. That's sort of kind of what I'm thinking right now. But as I said, we'll move on because we've got the Lions at 7.5 in this game. And what can I say? The Ottawa Red Blacks are on the suspended list. They were so close a few weeks ago to getting that win in Toronto, and I really felt like they'd sort of turned the corner with Nick Arbuckle. I mean, I saw that it was just so dreadful, everything about that football game, to the point Arbuckle got pulled in, Caleb Evans came in, he wasn't doing anything else, and I mean, the defense in the second half just got run all over by the Argos. Listen, I think it's next year territory. You saw how dejected the fans were, and I think the team's feeling that way as well. They really needed that win last night or last week, I should say. I'm now traveling all the way out to BC to take on a Lions team that I think is going to be smarting from their first really tough, significant beatdown of the year at the hands of the Calgary Stampeders. And we knew the Calgary Stampeders were due to beat a good football team at some point. They're now 1-5 against Winnipeg and Calgary. But I just think that the Lions, from what we've seen so far, are in another class than the Ottawa Red Blacks, and they do not have the quarterbacking. I think the BC is going to be hungry to get back in and put a big, big performance up and not take the foot off the gas. So I like BC, even though, again, I've probably more often than not picked the underdogs in these 7 or 8 point games.
It's 7.5. It's big again, right?
I think the way this one's shaping up, you'd have to have a lot of confidence that something much better than what we saw last week's going to happen for Ottawa on the road in BC against a good football team. And I can't co-sign on that. I like the Lions -7.5.
Yeah, I think I'm going to ride with you on the Lions here, -7.5. Vernon Adams Jr. cannot possibly be as bad this week as he was last week, and he would own that. I mean, and they're not going to have Brian Burnham. He's been placed on the 6th game. They missed Brian Burnham earlier in the season, and this is no slight to Brian Burnham. They missed him for sure. Now, they did have Rourke at quarterback then, so it was a little bit different, but they've got other weapons. Lucky Whitehead. I've said it 1,000 times. Keon Hatcher is a phenomenal talent. Maybe more opportunity for him here. Javon Cottoy. Dominique Grimes is having a absolutely monstrous season. So they've got some guys that they can move around in that offense. Their defense didn't play that bad in that loss to Calgary. I mean, they forced them to settle for a bunch of field goals. Kadeem Carey ran one in after a PI, or after a deep play down the field to Philpott. And then at the end of the game, garbage time touchdown for Logan, which should have been tackled better, but it wasn't. That guy's a little firecracker anyway. So I thought their defense actually held up relatively well. There was no touchdown passes for Jake Mayer. Calgary doesn't surrender sacks. I mean, the Lions didn't sack the Calgary quarterback in 3 games this year. A little bit of a different story with the Ottawa Red Blacks. So I'm going to go with, it does come down to Vernon Adams. He doesn't have to be spectacular in this game, but he definitely has to be better than he was last week, and they should be able to win comfortably at home. So I'm on the Lions -7.5 as well. We're also both on the underdog Elks at home against the Montreal Alouettes. Huss, what's your reasoning behind this?
It's over. It's going to be over.
This is it?
+135. Money line. Book it. Elks get a home win. It's got to happen. It can't. I mean, this is their opportunity to win a damn game at home. I heard you guys on the show talking about the tailgate beforehand. They're going to have some fans out there. They have to win a home game at some point. And listen, I've liked some of the things that I've seen from Edmonton over the last little bit. I think Taylor Cornelius is feeling far more confident as the starting quarterback. I mean, his running game, for a guy his size, he really is mobile and has got a great arm. I mean, they've come up big on the road and have just been so disappointing at home. I have to think that they are poised to finally end the conversation of it being 1,000 whatever days since they've won a home game. The people there deserve it. And honestly, if they can't get this win against, an average Montreal team coming out, traveling on the road from the East, at this point in the season, what is Chris Jones doing? I mean, I know the first half of the year they had the full, it was a carousel every single day. It was different guys in the lineup. Surely you've got a better idea right now of guys that can help you win football games. You've got your quarterback. You've signed him to 2 years. You're showing him the confidence. Obviously, there's a few guys out that can help you in a big way in the lineup. But to me, Montreal, very average. The Elks, getting close to average, shall we say? Listen, getting 3 points as a home dog. I know they haven't won in years. I think it happens. I will be betting the money line, but for the lock shop, I'm definitely taking the +3.
Yeah, we're going to take the +3 here. Part of it is they can't lose another one at home, and if they're not going to lose, then you got to love the 3 points here. On top of everything you just have to say about Cornelius, the real intrigue here is the old Cornelius-Trevor Harris battle. The return of Trevor Harris, who, when he was here, I'll say it, I mean, I wasn't too sure how much game he had left. I'm very impressed with Trevor Harris getting his career back on track out in Montreal. But the reason the Elks moved on from Trevor Harris was because of Taylor Cornelius. Now Trevor Harris returns home with a chance to hand Cornelius another record-setting loss at home. I love the storyline in this game. The great news here is that, from Edmonton's perspective, Kevin Brown, since taking over, has looked like a legitimate number 1 running back in this league. Dylan Mitchell has been great, but Kenny Lawler's practicing in full this week. He's on the 6th game. He's only missed 3 games, and he's been full participant in practice. So all of a sudden, now, 2 legit weapons for Cornelius and Lawler and Mitchell was doing a lot without Lawler in the lineup. And Lawler's going to get his targets, but he's also going to draw extra coverage from that defense, which could open up Mitchell, who's got a connection with Cornelius, for even a little bit more. And I saw somebody on Twitter say, because on the CFL staff picks, I think there's 7 of them, and 4 of them took the Elks. And I saw some people being like, why in the world would anybody be taking the Elks to beat the Alouettes? And the Alouettes, I think, have 2 more wins than the Elks, or 2 or 3 more wins than the Elks this year, right? I thought you described the Alouettes in a fair fashion earlier on, like an average team. I think that's I don't think that's slander by any stretch of the imagination on the Alouettes. And the Edmonton Elks coming off that win against the Riders, having a bye week, getting Lawler back, needing a win at home so badly. Like, not only their playoff hopes are very slim. Yeah, you got to win to keep them alive. I get that. But just as an organization to have the pride to get one at home, this game for them should be treated like a playoff game. So, I like Edmonton +3 here.
That is the best point of it all. Listen, I really like what Victor Quee's done in the community. I think they've worked incredibly hard to try to earn back the trust of Elks fans. They've done a lot of good things, but none of it matters if you can't get a damn win once in a while. And I think this will be big. I really do think this could be a turning point for the organization, the franchise, just to get a bit of a good feeling around Commonwealth leaving a game, because it has been so long since that has happened. By the way, which games are you calling this week?
I just have the one, buddy, and it's here at home. So there's no travel for me this week. Yeah, I just get to stay at home. I do the Elks game. I think, let's see here. Farhan is calling the game in Vancouver, and Rod's coming out to Winnipeg and Calgary. So I've got Matt Dunnigan rolling into town, and it'll be Dunnigan and I on the Elks game Saturday afternoon, which is awesome. I'm bringing my family to the game. They're going to get to come up to the booth. They haven't been up there in 2 or 3 years. So really looking forward to this game. Should be a fun experience.
Oh, man, that is great. Well, it's nice for you to not have to be a map watcher for at least one weekend over the course.
And that's it. After that, I'm gone every weekend for the rest of the season. So, yeah, this is my one weekend home. And I'm still working, but it's going to be great. All right, and then you get the Stamps and the Argos. Now, we locked this number in at 5.5, Huss. I looked this morning, and I think it's at 6 now.
It is at 6.
I think it moved this morning. So you can find, of course, all the odds we're talking about at CoolBet. We're going to go head-to-head on this one, and it was a tough call. I don't love the Argos +5.5, and I don't necessarily love the Stamps at 5.5 here either. So where are you at on Toronto? What's the reasoning for the cover here?
Well, I'll be honest. I think Calgary naturally might have a little bit of a letdown after getting that win against BC that they so desperately needed. And obviously Jake Mayer's got the new contract, maybe a little bit more pressure for him to show off. But to be honest, I think this is also a bet on the Toronto Argonauts. I mean, the Argos, and we've talked about them throughout the year. I mean, it's easy to think, well, they're in the East. Oh, they're the best team in the East. It's like being it's being the best of a really, really bad lot. But they've played very tough games. I mean, the Bombers had one of their closest games of the entire season against Toronto. And when you look back at these two teams meeting earlier, it was a field goal game. I just don't see Calgary running away from Toronto in this game. And even if they're down by double digits, I certainly think that MBT can, bring them back in the fourth quarter and make it close. So I'm just, when you're talking about a line like this of two teams that certainly I think Calgary's a better team than Toronto overall, but Toronto's been impressive. And I think they, as the first place team in the East, look at a game like this as a huge opportunity to show that they can hang with the top teams in the West, because certainly one of those teams in the East are going to be in the Grey Cup in Regina in November. The Argos would certainly be the favorites to do that, and this is the sort of game that I think they can really build on. So I think this is going to be a fun way to finish off the week in the Canadian Football League. And as I say, I don't think the Argos win this game, but I was kind of expecting you to be calling it. That's why I picked it, because then, of course, it's going to be a nail-biting thriller going forward. But give me the Argos. As I said, if you're betting it right now, +6. I didn't mind taking the +5.5. I do think that this will be a relatively close game. I think the Argos offense is rolling. They put up, 48 last week?
Yeah, big week last week.
They're going to need to be able to handle Calgary's running game, and obviously an inspired Jake Mayer. But I think this will be one of the best games of the week in the Canadian Football League, and I do think it'll be close. So I don't mind taking the Argos and taking the points.
I do think it's going to be a really good football game, and I think you made a good point on Toronto trying to prove what they can do out in the West. In their last 7 games, and they've won 4 in a row, Toronto, but in their last 7 games, the one was against Calgary, 3-point loss, so close game. Outside of that, in the last 2 months, they've only played the Ticats and the Red Blacks. And you know what I mean? Like, so I don't know how much I'm reading into Toronto playing well as of late when it's just been the Ticats and the Red Blacks in 6 of the last 8 weeks on the schedule. So I think, get out on the road here against a Calgary team that has had a much more difficult schedule as of late. Should be overall as a team, I personally think, in a better spot. And if they want to, they can just commit to the ground game with Kadeem Carey and Peyton Logan. And I don't know why they don't do that more. Both of those guys are absolutely phenomenal running backs. There's a reason Calgary as a team averages like 6 yards per carry so far this season. And Jake Muir also still needs to have that game. Like I've said it multiple times, he's putting up like 294 yards. He put up 300-yard, 3-touchdown game. That was in a loss, though. I think he still needs to have that dominating performance, which he certainly is capable of. I don't know. I know they kept it close against Calgary last time. But I just have a hard time believing a team that's only played the Red Blacks and Ticats is going to come on out and give the Stamps a challenge out in Calgary this week. So
you know what this is like? When you sign up for beer league hockey and you play, the 6 or 7 games, and then you realize you're smoking all the other teams.
Yeah.
So you move up a division.
Yeah.
Well, the Argos have just got elevated from their division, and now they're playing against the actual competition in the league. I think they'll be ready for it.
From a big perspective across the league, man, if they go out and make a statement victory in Calgary, that goes a long way for could Toronto actually win the Grey Cup coming out of the East discussion?
Yeah, it a lot more than just, the Grey Cup will be played in Winnipeg in late November, and then you'll have a coronation in Regina a week later. No, I think that, Dinwiddie's got this team playing very well. I think they know full well that they're moving from the JV to the varsity now that they're playing the Calgary Stampeders this weekend. But I think that they've been doing a lot of things right. I think they'll be ready for the challenge. And I expect Toronto to acquit themselves well and be in this game with Calgary. And that's why I will take the points. Hey, before we finish up, speaking of Calgary, let's do a little speculation. Where does Bo Levi Mitchell take his first snap in the 2023 season, assuming he's still in the Canadian Football League, which I certainly expect he will?
I'll tell you right now, I'm not an anti-Cody Fajardo guy. I love Cody. He's a great dude. But I am here for the drama of Bo Levi Mitchell in green and white. The Riders organization, not the organization, but the Riders fan base has been the biggest anti-Bo movement in the league for 10 years. I love the idea of him coming in and being their savior at the quarterback position. So, that would be so fun. I do think he probably ends up somewhere out in the East, but man, would that be something in Regina. Holy smokes.
You couldn't said it. What was Rod Peterson back when Rod was calling the games had some
That was when he called it. He said that he called it and said, "Shut your mouth, Bo Levi," or something like that. Yeah. Roddy used to get pretty involved in that stuff.
He's fired up. Hey, you know what? You got to love passionate home team broadcasters, and Rod was certainly one of them. Saskatchewan would be the juiciest spot, not to mention staying in the West, probably playing Calgary at least 3 times a season. I'm here for that. But I do think, I guess, Ottawa has Masoli. He got hurt so early. He'll come back. I assume he's still part of their plans going forward. Toronto, listen, McLeod Bethel-Thompson's winning games right now and doing well for them. He's always seemed to be one signing away from losing his job.
I know.
And yet he's still the guy there. And I guess we'll see what happens for the rest of the season. Obviously, Hamilton, with the disappointing year they've had, I could see that as being a possibility if they want to do a major turnover. Just hard to think that they went back-to-back Grey Cups with Masoli and Evans, and they could be without either of them, but that's what happens with a season like this. But I'm with you. Number 1 on the storyline power poll, without a doubt, Saskatchewan Roughriders. Bo Levi in green. Can you imagine?
Part of me, and I only know Bo a little bit. We get along pretty well. Part of me thinks Bo would be up for that. Like to go to Ryderville, become a hero, and go back in and beat the Calgary Stampeders in the West. Like it's a lot different if you're playing in the East. You get to play Calgary, but if you're in the West and you're battling with the Stampeders head to head, part of me thinks Bo might eat that up, man.
What about Edmonton?
Now that I can't. I mean, as far as juicy goes, sure, that would be even better, maybe, but. I can't see that.
How much did they give Cornelius? I mean,
Cornelius got a 2-year deal, and he got pretty good chunk. He's over $320,000 in both years. Looking at, so he didn't get Jake Mayer money, but he got just below Jake Mayer money. So it's a pretty big commitment. I think a lot of it is a big roster bonus, at the beginning of the year. So you might be able to get it. I mean, they gave Arbuckle a deal and got out of that essentially, right? So there's always ways around it, but. Yeah, look, Bo's 32 years old, man. There's a lot of game there left. He was 6-2 when was he 6-2 or 6-3? Like he was 2 or 3 games above 500 when he lost his job this year. So this was always about eventually getting to Jake Mayer as opposed to Bo Levi can't play anymore.
Well, I mean, I just think back to week 1 of the season, that first week, and listening to Dickinson talking after the game about Jake Mayer and how they've got tons of confidence in him. And it almost seemed like it was a matter of time in week 1. We finally got to that point, but I'm with you. There's still some more Bo Levi. The more I have this conversation, I don't want him going to the East. It needs to happen.
Let's keep him in the West.
Saskatchewan or Edmonton, one of those 2 spots. I guess if BC would be a possibility if Nathan Rourke is not in the picture for next year, if he gets an NFL opportunity or something.
But I got a lot of time for Rourke in BC, Mayer in Calgary, Bo Levi in Saskatchewan, Zach Collaros in Winnipeg, and I mean maybe Cornelius here. Who knows? Maybe Cody Fajardo ends up somewhere else. Throw Fajardo in Edmonton, and then it's the whole division. Let's go. That'd be crazy. Hey, before we go. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, just relegate the East. Let's just have this, get these quarterbacks set up the way we've just talked about it, and have that go and play each other every week.
We sit here and talk about this, and the Argos are going to win the Grey Cup now that we just said it, right? We're going to sit here, relegate the East. Argos are winning it all. Golf pick before we go. Huss, what do you got?
Yeah, Sanderson Farms. I haven't spent too much time on this, but really enjoy the President's Cup. And those team events are so much fun to bet on where you get the individual matches each and every day. Sam Burns played great in that event, and he is right back at it playing this week. He's the clear favorite. He was 13-1. It's now down to 12-1. You got Heath Thagala, and then JT Poston, Danny McCarthy, Russell Henley. I mean, not a stacked field by any stretch of the imagination. I got a little sprinkle on Davis Riley, though. He's a young player that I think is going to pop at some point soon, and
I think he popped up on our cards a couple times last year in some of the smaller events.
Absolutely. And this is the sort of event that we've often seen some younger players break through. We had a couple, Tom Kim with his win a few weeks back, and he was, the story of the President's Cup from the international side of things. But I like Davis Riley. I think he's a little bit of an under the radar up and comer. And at 35-1 in a very, very light field, that's worth a little sprinkle. So I'm on Davis Riley. That's pretty much it. I will maybe look at some of the groupings, and obviously we've got make the cut. We'll see if P. Greggy has a make the cut parlay in the exclusives, and we'll jump on that as well. But give me Davis Riley 35-1. I think that's about as good of a number as you'll see anywhere over from our friends at Coolbet.
And that's going to do it for another episode of The Lock Shop. Tomorrow, be watching once again late morning. We'll get you ready for the Dolphins and the Bengals Thursday night football. Cannot wait to dive into that one. Really looking forward to that Thursday nighter. So that'll be a fun one to set up. If you have been watching on the live stream, make sure you subscribe to the podcast. Just search The Lock Shop on all of your podcasting platforms, and tell your friends about The Lock Shop as well if they're into the odd wager here or there with our partners at Coolbet. Huss, enjoy your show today, and we'll talk to you tomorrow, bud.
You got it. Thanks, Dusty.